In the news tonight, the Prime Minister pledges to better the living conditions of teachers and urges that prices not be raised during the holy month of Ramadan. Clashes erupt across the occupied West Bank as Palestinians commemorate Nakba Day. And more than 2,000 rebels and their families are evacuated from a Damascus suburb as a new round of Syria talks opens in Geneva. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. Prime Minister Hani Molki said his government is interested to raise the living standards and social conditions of the kingdom's teachers. He spoke at a meeting with the Teachers Association President Basil Frehat and members to discuss the government's efforts to improve education. He pledged to positively deal with the association's basic demands and try to meet them to the best of its ability. One of these is the end of service benefits, which the Prime Minister promised to pass to the Cabinet to decide on. He also instructed the Legislative and Opinion Bureau to discuss the amended Teachers Association draft law before passing it to Parliament. Molki also vowed zero tolerance with assaults on teachers, noting that the state had stiffened penalties against those who attack on-duty public sector employees. The meeting was attended by Education Minister Omar Razaz, Minister for Political and Parliamentary Affairs Musa Maaita, and State Minister for Media Affairs Mohammed Momeni. The Prime Minister also chaired a meeting at the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Supply to check on measures taken to ensure that high-quality commodities are available at reasonable prices during the holy month of Ramadan. Molki urged that prices remain at affordable levels during the month of fasting, noting that the role of the civic and military consumer corporations to stabilize prices. He also said there will be no price hikes this year. Earlier, the Cabinet decided to keep prices at their current levels at the civil and military consumer corporations for the rest of the year. Minister of Industry, Trade and Supply Ya'rub Quda outlined the measures taken by the Ministry for Ramadan. He said the prices of 57 staple food items are being strictly monitored, including cereals, vegetables, red meat and poultry. The minister said 46 commodities have seen their prices drop and pledged to ensure a sufficient and steady supply of food items. Meantime, Prime Minister Molki announced that working hours for public sector employees during the holy month of Ramadan will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. A statement by the Prime Minister's office said the decision excludes employees whose departments require that they work longer hours. The Prime Minister also met with Assistant to Deputy Director of U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, Maria Longley. Molki thanked Washington for its continued aid to support the kingdom's vital projects in the health, education and water sectors, as well as local development. The Prime Minister also spoke about the impact of regional turmoil on Jordan's economy, namely the Syrian crisis. He said more international aid is needed to enable Jordan to provide services to Syrian refugees. Longley said she recognized the burden of hosting the Syrian refugees and the need of supporting Jordan in this endeavor. Minister of Foreign and Expatriate Affairs Ayman Safadi received President of the Jordanian French Parliamentary Friendship Committee Christine Kamerman and an accompanying delegation. They discussed Jordanian-French ties and scopes of further cementing cooperation in various fields, as well as regional issues of common interests. The Independent Election Commission, IEC, has asked the Civil Status and Passport Department to provide it with the initial voters list ahead of the mid-August municipal elections. President of the IEC's Board of Commissioners, Khulal, said the initial list will be posted on the Commission's website for 7 days. The King Hussein bin Ali Brigade of the Jordan Armed Forces carried out a joint military drill with U.S. forces, part of Eagle Lion annual exercise. The war games featured fighting in built-in urban areas, live fire and rescue, as well as the evacuation of civilians. The 2017 Eagle Lion has drawn military forces from over 20 countries. It aims at enhancing cooperation among the armed forces of participating countries, improving their defensive capabilities, strategic planning and crisis management. Her Majesty Queen Rania chaired the Royal Health Awareness Society Annual Board of Trustees meeting during a visit to the Bal'az Secondary School for Girls in Ajloon Governorate. Her Majesty overviewed the progress of the Society's programs, including Nestle's Ajyal Salima program and the Healthy Kitchen project that are aimed at raising health awareness in schools across Jordan. During the meeting, the director of the Society reflected on the Royal Health Society's achievements over the past year, which were made possible through partnerships with the Ministers of Health and Education, the private sector and other international organizations. Her Majesty emphasized the importance of encouraging positive health practices and stressed the need to focus on maintaining the cleanness of public areas and parks. At the school, Queen Rania met with a few teachers and students partaking in hands-on activities before heading to the Healthy Kitchen Project's operations, where she met with local women who produce healthy meals for schools in the area. The Royal Healthy Awareness Society is a Queen Rania initiative established in 2005 for the purpose of promoting health awareness in Jordan and empowering Jordanians to adopt healthy lifestyle options. Palestinians across the occupied West Bank and Gaza marked Nakba Day. They were commemorating Nakba, or catastrophe, that saw hundreds of thousands of Palestinians flee or were forced to leave their homes after the creation of Israel. In the occupied West Bank city of Bethlehem and near Ramallah, hundreds of youths clashed with Israeli military forces. In Ramallah city, people stood still as a siren was heard. In Gaza, dozens of youths marched holding flags and symbolic keys representing houses from which their ancestors were driven in 1948. The refugees who fled during the 1948 war and their descendants now number around 5 million. Many live as refugees in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Refugees cling to a right of return, and their fate is one of the thorniest issues in efforts to create a Palestinian state. More than 2,000 rebels and their family members left the devastated district of Qaboon on the edge of the Syrian capital Damascus, according to state media. The evacuation got underway after more than 2 months of aerial strikes and artillery shelling. The rebels agreed overnight to a secret evacuation deal after being cornered in a small patch of Qaboon. The area has been largely reduced to rubble after being struck by hundreds of aerial strikes and missiles over a period of about 80 days. The Syrian army resumed its intensive bombardment of the district on Wednesday after a one-day ultimatum it gave the rebels to surrender and agree to evacuate to rebel-held areas in northern Syria. Meantime, UN Syria envoy Staffan de Mistura downplayed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's dismissive comments, labeling the Geneva process as an unsubstantial and null process meant for the media. De Mistura's comments were made at the opening of a 6th round of peace talks in Syria or in the Swiss city. Assad's negotiator Bashar al-Jafari arrived in Geneva with an 18-strong negotiating delegation. The envoy said the United States is increasingly engaged and interested in the process and hinted at high-level diplomacy going on behind the scenes. The Geneva round talks comes after an agreement by Russia, Turkey and Iran to arrange and monitor de-escalation zones in Syria to reduce the fighting, which de Mistura insists on taking advantage of. The official talks will start tomorrow and end on Saturday.
Like to be able to make sure that meanwhile the two are working in some form of sync. I give an example. Everybody has been telling us, and we agree, that any type of reduction of violence, in this case de-escalation, cannot be sustained unless there is a political horizon in one direction or the other. That's exactly what we are pushing for.
Iraqi forces backed by US airstrikes advance into neighborhoods under the control of Daesh in Mosul. Troops are seeking to dislodge the militants entrenched in a central mosque before the holy month of Ramadan. 7 months into the campaign to recapture Mosul, militants are besieged in its northwestern corner, home to the historic Old City Center and the medieval Grand Al-Nouri Mosque. Military commanders and intelligence officials say they aim to take control of the mosque before Ramadan starts this month, even if there are still pockets under militant control. The mosque has high symbolic and strategic value for Daesh. Commanders hope its capture will deal a painful blow to fighter morale and bring an end to resistance in the city. Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country is opposed to any new countries acquiring nuclear weapons. But he said the world should talk to North Korea rather than threaten it. Putin, speaking in Beijing, said nuclear tests of the type Pyongyang had been carrying out in recent weeks are unacceptable, but that a peaceful solution to rising tensions on the Korean peninsula is needed. The Russian Defense Ministry said yesterday a ballistic missile fired by North Korea had crashed into the Sea of Japan around 500 kilometers off the Russian coast. But Putin said the missile launch presented no threat to Russia, but it escalates the conflict. He said the world needs to return to dialogue with North Korea and find ways to resolve the problem peacefully.
The first thing I want to say, I want to confirm that we are categorically against the expansion of the club of nuclear powers, including the Korean Peninsula and North Korea. Our position is well known to our international partners and North Korea in particular. We are against it. We consider it counterproductive, harmful and dangerous. We need to return to dialogue with North Korea and stop scaring it and find ways to resolve these problems peacefully, if it is possible. I think it is.
New French President Emmanuel Macron appointed a conservative prime minister in a move to broaden his political appeal and weaken his opponents before legislative elections next month. 46-year-old Edouard Philippe, a lawmaker and mayor of Port City, Le Havre, is from the moderate wing of the main centre-right, the Republicans Party. He will be a counter-right to former socialist MPs who have joined Macron's cause. Élysées Secretary General Alexis Colère made the announcement. Macron has vowed to end the left-right politics which have dominated France for decades, and his start-up centrist Republic on the Move RAM party, which is just a year old, needs to find a wide base of support for the parliamentary elections. A British health official said it's encouraging that a predicted second spike of cyber attacks had not yet occurred. Europe's police agency Europol said yesterday that the ransomware worm had already locked up to more than 200,000 computers in more than 150 countries. However, the cyber attack devastated devices across Asia. Here's more.
The world waking up to more fallout from a global cyber attack on Monday. Governments and businesses in Asia reporting some disruptions from the WannaCry ransomware worm, as experts warn of a wider impact to come as employees power up computers and check emails. The worms locked up hundreds of thousands of computers in more than 150 countries since Friday. Experts say it's waiting in emails left unopened over the weekend, like cyber landmines. Already by noon, payment systems at China's energy giant PetroChina were affected, and state media puts 200,000 computers affected around the country. 2 major Indonesian hospitals reported they'd been hit. There were also reports from South Korea and Australia. Experts fear the attackers behind WannaCry or copycats may develop new versions of the worm. The Hong Kong-based cybersecurity firm NetworkBox told Reuters their team had seen a variant of the ransomware that didn't use email to lure victims. They also said several major companies in Asia had been hit by the worm but would likely not publicly admit infection. On Sunday, Microsoft seemed to acknowledge what researchers around the world already guessed. The worm used a hacking tool built by America's NSA that leaked online in April. Infected computers seem to be mostly out-of-date devices that groups didn't think were worth the price of upgrading, which meant they missed an update from Microsoft that fixed the security gap the worm uses to infect devices.
The Formula One Spanish Grand Prix was on most racing minds this weekend. But for a dedicated few in Britain, the new lawnmower race season was their adrenaline fix. In this sport, there are no team orders and all mowers race on an even grass playing field. It is a cheap fun sport for people who love to race on a budget, and yet the challenge for the British Championship is a hard-fought battle which takes place from May to mid-October. There are 3 categories of racing. Group 2 was won by local rider Roger Knowlson. South African Stuart Johnson won the Group 3 buggy race, while Daniel Godden outshone his rivals in the Group 4 tractor-style class. Rafael Nadal beat Dominic Thiem 7-6, 6-4 to win his 5th Madrid Open title and move into the world's top 4. The Spaniard has now won 3 straight titles after his Barcelona Open and Monte Carlo Masters victories. Nadal edged the Australian in the tie-break of a tense first set that lasted 1 hour and 18 minutes. He broke world number 7 Thiem early in the second set to set up the win. Nadal will be confirmed as the new world number 4, replacing 18-time Grand Slam champion Roger Federer. World number 1 Andy Murray will be hoping for a return to form as he defends his Italian Open title in Rome this week. The Scot comes into the tournament on the back of a third-round 6-3, 6-3 loss to world number 59 Borna Coric of Croatia in Madrid last week, but he will be hoping for a return to the form which saw him beat Serb Novak Djokovic in the 2016 Italian Open final. Murray will face Fabio Fognini in the second round, and in their previous 5 encounters, world number 29 Fognini has won 2 of their 5 matches, although Murray won the last time they met in the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. And finally, it will continue to be pleasant tonight, especially in the hilly areas with moderate winds. Tomorrow, a slight drop in temperature is expected, but it will remain sunny and warm in most regions and hot in the Jordan Valley, Badia and the Dead Sea. Winds will be northwesterly moderate to brisk. The Gulf Aqaba should expect a hot and dry day tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here are top stories once again. The Prime Minister pledges to better the living conditions of teachers and urges that prices not be raised during the holy month of Ramadan. Clashes erupt across the occupied West Bank as Palestinians commemorate Nakba Day. And more than 2,000 rebels and their families are evacuated from a Damascus suburb as a new round of Syria talks opens in Geneva. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Leo Balkar. Have a good night.